let's talk specifically to the writers, the people, because I very rarely can talk to them. So it'd be great if you have any advice for the two people. There's two camps. There's one, hey, maybe they are in college, maybe they're not in college. They're trying to figure out writing and working for a company or a news place, and they're just starting. And I feel like there's the second audience that, hey, they know writing is their thing, but it's hard to monetize by themselves. What do those two camps do?
I would say for the first camp, the best writers are voracious readers. You are never going to get better at writing if you're not constantly consuming content. So whatever you consider to be your dream career, read everything that the people who are in that field are putting out. You will get better. You'll find your own creative space. You will find inspiration. I think it's really important. And then for the second camp, I would say don't try too hard to be a generalist in terms of what you're talking about. We have seen a huge trend lately of people who are super, super specialists in terms of media. And that, I think, is what creates an audience that is willing to come back for more all the time. We can get the general news for free from wherever we want. It's like on our phone all the time. You get a million push notifications a day. But if you want to create something special and you know that you're good at talking about this one thing, commit to it and it'll be great.
I might, because I'm so out of it, these might be stupid questions, but when it comes to writing, are there certain, whether it's YouTube channels, newsletters, any types of content that are specifically for writers? Because I know me, I watch so many video YouTube channels where I know every single new light, new camera, new technique. Oh, I need to interview people. I'm aware of that sphere, but does that exist for writers? Who are people that you follow?
For sure. So I read a ton of newsletters every day, just general news, from the Times and the Journal and Bloomberg and all of those places. But there is one specific newsletter for anybody who wants to create a newsletter, and it's called Not a Newsletter. It's written by Dan Oshinsky. It's a fantastic newsletter that's sent out via email, but it's a Google Doc that you can see where people are, and you can't edit it, but you can. It's like it's kind of fun. You've got a million like anonymous meerkats looking at the Google Doc, and it's awesome in terms of how to monetize a product, what people are doing that's creative and new and exciting. It comes out not super frequently, so when it does hit your inbox, we're in our Slack right away, like, oh man, Dan Oshinsky, no, they're not a newsletter. That's a great one. And for podcasts, I'm a big fan of Hot Pod, which is a classic podcast newsletter, but that one's doing some cool stuff as well. There's something for everybody.
The world is kind of being rocked with people leaving New York Times, people leaving these publications that they've been at for a very long time, whether they're quitting or they're being fired. There's just this sense in the journalism world that it doesn't seem as stable as it once did. Right. So what does that mean for the future of writers, the future for people who want to tell their stories via the written word?
Yeah, I would say to start, I don't think that the journalism world has felt stable this century. Like
that's
there's always
that's
some factor that is rocking us. And the future, though, I think is less about the medium. It's about the person. We're going to find a lot fewer medium-specific creators is my thesis here. Back in the day, you would go to journalism school and either you would study TV or newspaper or magazine, and that was what you knew, and that was what you would go make a career out of doing. But I think now, even in schools, you're studying all of it. I was a business journalism major, not a newspaper journalism major. And you learn how to make a podcast, make a video, make a reel for yourself, write a newspaper story, all of it, and even do like photojournalism and things like that. So I think that we're starting to kind of see the effects of that shift in the education side of things in the real world in practice. And people are gravitating towards creatives. They're gravitating toward people whose names they know, whose content they love, whose brand they trust, regardless of where they're putting content out. So for Morning Brew, that's the Morning Brew brand. If we tell you to listen to this podcast, you're going to trust us because you love our newsletter. And vice versa with the podcast. We've had a lot of people who have just found the podcast independently of Morning Brew. And now we're saying, can you go subscribe to this newsletter? And they do because they trust what I'm saying when I'm on the show. And I think that is honestly the future. It's less what medium is going to die next and more what person is going to rise above the rest of the noise and give people something that's valuable and something that they want to keep coming back for.
How do you guys balance that then? Building a brand that is Morning Brew and it's not Kinsey, it's not Josh. Because there are different things that you have to do, and there's, pros and cons to both. Me, Sara DIETSCHY, oh, that's great. Like my fans feel, I haven't said fans ever. My fam feels like they have, a connection with me. But with that, it's very hard to scale, because everything has to be me. So I think that's what's great about building a brand, like Morning Brew or, bigger, just CNN. You establish some credibility, and it doesn't matter who's talking to you. That lends itself to different platforms. What's been your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to do this, but I'm going to use Barstool as an example.
Yeah.
So you think about Barstool created a really sticky product. They created something that people were obsessed with. And then they used that machine with ad sales, with producers, with backup and infrastructure to then invest in talent that they thought needed to be amplified in some way. They're investing in people who might have a small audience, but definitely don't have a huge audience. And then they're magnifying them times a million, like to the moon. And that's a model that I think we're going to see a lot more of, this sort of network model of here's somebody who's definitely under the radar but has the capacity to be a superstar. Let's give them what they need to be a superstar. We'll take some of the money, but this person is going to grow their brand right alongside us as well. With Morning Brew and Business Casual, my like quote unquote brand is pretty much like tied directly to Morning Brew and Business Casual. And I like it that's been great and I have enjoyed it. And I would never, if I just started a podcast by myself, probably wouldn't have been able to scale it to what Business Casual is today without Morning Brew's backing. So it's useful. It's I don't know. It works in theory and in practice, I think, and I think we're going to see a lot more of it.
What is that hiring process like?
Yeah.
How long does it last? What are the questions you ask?
Lots of questions. Well, for editorial, it always starts with a writing sample. That's always going to be the most important part of your application. It's great to say, like, I would really enjoy to sit next to this person for 8 hours a day, but if they can't do their job well, then, like, that doesn't really matter. So always starts with a writing sample. And then once we decide whether or not they're going to be a super strong writer or have something interesting or original to say, that's the answer to that is all yes, then we'll bring them in for in-person interviews. Well, I guess it used to be in-person interviews. Now it's like
Zoom interviews.
And have them talk to a couple people on the team, not just people on the editorial team, but people in ad sales or people in tech, and make sure that people are getting that cross-functional side of things before they start. And then more writing, and then they're hired. I wish it were that simple. I wish that it was just that easy to go out and find people.
I know. Well, yeah, I mean, I think anyone who builds anything, that's probably the most relatable struggle, is you think, okay, I'll just, have a few people that can replicate what I can do. But then you learn, oh, okay, that's way harder than you think.
Yeah.
And I mean, what you mentioned, for better or worse, people have to be more multifaceted than ever before. If you are a writer, hey, you need to understand some context beyond that.
Right.
You need to understand some video, maybe some podcasting.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things to think about.
And I also think that's especially true in the startup community that I work in. It's never going to hurt to be the Swiss Army knife kind of employee at any company that you work at. But I think especially at a startup, you have to kind of be prepared to take on anything and to get excited by it. We have kind of been a super collaborative team from day one, and it's been for the best. And that I think is when some of our greatest ideas happen, is when we're all just like shooting the shit and trying out new things.